Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're well. It's very rainy where I am in Essex at the moment. I think the whole country is pretty rainy. Thanks for joining us. A few little parts just to go over. First of all, you can ask questions during this event. It's quite a long event. A few bits of technical information we're going to cover, but we are going to take a break in the middle, otherwise it might be a bit too long. You can ask questions. Down the bottom you should see a panel. Got myself here and with Archie. I'll be doing a lot of the presenting, but Archie's there as well, so he'll monitor the questions and he'll jump in when he needs to. So if you do have questions at any time, put them in there. If we don't get a chance to answer them all, we'll follow up afterwards and let you know, but we should have quite enough time to be able to cover everyone's questions should you need them. Okay, so you will get copies of these slides as well when we're finished. So, okay, so I'm Michael Venner. A lot of the people on here, I believe I can see all your names. A lot of you do know me already. I've worked with quite a few of you, connected with quite a few of you on LinkedIn as well. So I've been in the industry for about 19 years now. Used to own a certification body myself, then went over to NQA probably about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Okay, I do 9001 audits, 14,000, 45,000, do a couple of weird charity ones that people never heard of. But my primary focus is the aerospace standards, AS 9100 and 9120. There's also another standard that I cover, AS 6081, which not too many people would have heard of, but that's a standard for counterfeit products. So I do quite a few events for the MOD. I support the MOD with their supply chain events, and they'll focus quite a bit on counterfeit products. So I'm one of their keynote speakers for that. So that's just one of the other additional standards. AS 6081 isn't a standard that you can often get certified to. NQA is one of the only CBs that actually does that. It's not quite the same as AS 9100. It doesn't go through OASIS or anything like that, but they are looking at that, funny enough. But it's quite a nice standard, and it integrates with 9100 and 9120. This presentation is not about that, but it's quite a useful standard. You'll see on there, on the slide, there's a little QR code. If you did want to connect on LinkedIn, if you haven't already, you can just get your phone out, just scan that, and it will take you straight through to LinkedIn if you wish. And I'll let Archie introduce himself. He's got a QR code as well, so if you want to scan Archie.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Archie Gemmell, so I'm here today to support Mike. I'm going to be sat in the background trying to pull together any questions you ask and look for get the answers sorted, and then kind of support Mike through the process. So I've been with NQA now for 3 years. I'm predominantly an aerospace auditor, so like Mike, I can do AS 9100, recently qualified for 9120, and I'm also qualified with a 6081 as well. I'm predominantly on the road, so I'm kind of out all the time while Mike does the kind of director piece behind us. So prior to that, I was in the RAF, so I've had 23 years in the RAF as a engineering technician and manager, and was involved in quality within the RAF as well, so auditing MROs and the like as well. So quite a bit of experience with the quality from kind of hands-on perspective within the military as well. So like I say, I'll be sat in the background now with Mike doing most of the talking really, so hand back to Mike.
Everyone knows I like to talk, that's the problem. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. So rough agenda for the next few hours. Obviously we're flexible on this. Some things might take a little bit longer, some things might take a little bit less time. First of all, first front end of the webinar will be a sort of technical workshop, looking at some of the industry insights, some of the things you don't ordinarily see. We've got access to certain things within OASIS. We can pull data out that normal people can't actually pull out. So we've got hold of that. So I'm going to present some of that. with the NCR data behind that. It's quite interesting, actually. Then I'm going to go into AS9104. So in case you weren't aware, AS9104 is actually the accreditation standard. It's what we get approved to by UCAS, or if you're in another country, it could be ANAB or something like that. So they're the rules that we abide by. So they're currently going through a big change, and those changes will impact you as an organisation if you're certified, or if you're a consultant out there, it's going to impact some of your clients as well. So when we talk about the standard changing, people are worried that it's AS9100 changing or AS9120. That's not happening, but our standard is, and it will actually have a big impact on client organisation. So just here to communicate that to you, make you aware. We'll go into a bit of detail on some of those changes. It's not finalised, the standard, but it's in sort of the final revision, final draft. So it's pretty much fixed, in all honesty now. Then we'll take a little 15-minute break, and then we'll go into APQP, which is a standard that's being rolled out quite a lot. So you might start seeing it in contracts. A little bit technical. We're only giving an overview because the actual content of an APQP is quite detailed, and you can sort of do a whole 2-day or 5-day courses on it. So it's just to give you an insight into it, make you aware of it. As I say, you may start seeing it in contracts. Won't impact everyone, but you may take small bits of it. But more importantly, there's some elements in there that are good business practice anyway. So even if you aren't doing the full APQP process, there's some elements in there that might be good for your management systems, for improvements and tightening things up, things like that. We'll have a Q&A session after each of the sections, but in the afternoon also. Well, we are in the afternoon, so a little bit later after the second one, we'll have a bit more time. Feel free to ask any questions on what we're covering today, but myself and Archie have got many years experience, so if there's any other questions you have about anything, standard related or accreditation, feel free to pop them in the questions and we'll get through to you. If we don't know the answers, if it's something outside of aerospace, for example, then we can find the right people for you and contact you afterwards. Okay. So first part we're going to cover is aerospace audit trends and the new audit day calculations. Right, so the data's a little bit out of date because they don't let us take it too often. But this is the data presented that's pulled out of OASIS to show the number of non-conformances that are raised and where they are in the standard. You can see there's some sort of peaks there. These are all the clauses, and this is just the introduction of the revision D. They kind of archive off revision C data, and then they just present us with revision D. So the overall, as of May 2019, so that was about 18 months after the introduction of revision D, once it finally kicked in, there were 80,299 non-conformances, and there were 12,373 of those were major, and minor there were 67,576. I'll kind of give you a bit of an idea later, the impact of this. So the top non-conformities that you see there are supplier, looking at your external providers, and actually clause 843 is more the receipt of the goods, and sorry, got that wrong, is the purchase orders going out. So what we found initially, it was quite an easy hit for a lot of auditors, was the terms and conditions that go out to the suppliers. They were missing a lot of the key information. So there was quite a big steep curve in those findings, but they've kind of tapered off a little bit. But we still do find some weaknesses in people's purchase orders or purchasing information going out. 851 is the next big part of the standard that's given the non-conformances. It's kind of expected because 851 is basically your production process. That's always going to be up there, in all honesty. If it's not, then auditors aren't doing a good enough job finding issues and things like that, because it's just bound to happen. We'll find most issues there. 1021, non-conforming and corrective action. a lot of those will stem from people not closing out their non-conformances effectively. So when we raise non-conformances on you as an organisation, we go back next year to close them out, and they're still open. So as the rules of the standard are, we have to actually raise an additional non-conformance against the organisation for ineffective corrective actions. So we do actually find a lot of those. That's not all the non-conformances you see there, but a big contribution of it will be just organisations not effectively closing out non-conformances. So it's something that people should focus on quite a bit, because if you actually do it twice, you can end up into suspension, which is something not any of us want to see. Next one, measurement traceability. A little bit surprised on that one, in all honesty, but you're talking about calibration in essence in that one. Controller gauges and the environmental conditions of those. And last one, control of externally provided processes, products and services. Again, that's around the suppliers. So there's two key ones there around the suppliers. The standard is very big on supplier control. I've done other webinars before that actually explain why, but really it's because the supply chains nowadays are very complex and very long, and the people at the top, the Boeings, the Airbuses, all your primes, they've made the purchasing bit very robust because it's just so vast. They need to ensure that all the supply chain below them, it's not just one tier, two tier, you can get 3, 4, 5 tiers down. It's all in control, so they put quite a bit of focus on the supplier part. It's one of the biggest parts of the standard actually when you look at the requirements. So not surprised there as well. So the data allows you to pull it out by sector as well. There's a lot of data in OASIS, obviously, it's countries, everything, you name it, it's in there. So they allow us to pull it out by sector as well. So we've got the data here just to show a comparison between the Americas, Europe and Asia. There'll be a reason why I'm presenting this in a minute. You'll see it as I pull it together. So the overall total quantity, 44,761. This is over the same time period, by the way. The total majors, 5,455, and the minors, 39,306. So it's quite a big difference between the major and minors, you'll see there. The non-conformances are pretty much the same as what the overall is, which is kind of expected because America's the largest pool. But you'll see that it's pretty consistent there. When we look at Europe, 32,471 non-conformances. There were 7,056 majors, 25,415 minors. Again, the clauses pretty much the same apart from one difference, which is 441. 441's setting up your processes. We do find that quite a lot in the UK. I've got my own opinion on why that is. I think it's just the way European auditors view the process control bit a little bit different to the Americas. Just my own perspective there. So we do actually find in the UK especially a lot of problems with people's interaction flow charts. They haven't identified the processes correctly. The KPIs aren't being managed properly. That's certainly something I find quite often, and I know Archie sitting in the background, he finds that quite often as well. So it should be kind of a key focus of some clients and consultants to ensure you got the processes defined effectively, KPIs being managed. It's not as bad as it was before because people are starting to get used to it, but I do still see some quite poorly controlled processes and interactions and things like that. Now we look at Asia. So Asia's only had 3,067 non-conformances, 212 of those were major, and 2,855 were minor. So but you see a big difference as well in some of the key things that they're finding. 851 is always going to be up there. The non-conformities, they're up there, the supply bit. But quite surprisingly, there's internal audits which are up there. We don't see that too often in Europe, especially. We don't find too many issues with internal audits. Don't know the reason why. Maybe they're interpreting it slightly different in Asia. Maybe we're interpreting something slightly different here. We don't have access to that type of data. It's all just people's perceptions on certain things. But yeah, I don't often raise problems with people's internal audits. And the competence bit, we probably had a lot of competence issues a number of years ago, probably in the previous revision of the standard, to be honest, revision C, where people's competence requirements weren't very well defined and things like that. So I think in the UK we've probably got to grips with that, but maybe Asia's a little bit behind on that, just because it's a little bit newer to them. Just my opinion on that. So when we pull the data together, when we look at it, compare it, so the certificates, in May 2019, there were 21,288 certificates globally. I didn't break it down for AS 9100, 9120, 9110. Majority of them are 9100. I think there's about 1,000, if I remember rightly, 9120. But as of today, I did do a quick check today, there are 22,726 certificates in OASIS. So it's gone up by about 1,400, which isn't a great deal. It's about 500 certificates added globally every 6 months, which isn't a huge amount. And in the UK especially, it's not growing rapidly. It's growing slightly, but not too much. So any organisation that has aerospace standards in the UK are kind of one of the few, in all honesty. Trying to think of the exact number. It's probably, I think it's about 1,300 if I remember rightly. You can actually check this in OASIS yourselves. It's quite open, this element, on how many certificates there are. You can just go up to data search and then go over to the right where it asks for searching for certified organisations. Go in there, just hit the search button. Don't put any details in, just hit search and that pops the number. And then you can fine tune it as well. So it's all in there, it's all open for the number of certificates. You won't find the number of non-conformances, but you will find the number of certificates. So as you'll see, 46% are with Americas, 35% of the certificates are Europe, and then 19% are in Asia. So Asia's growing quite a lot actually, as they are with most things, but we can see a great increase in certificates out there. That's where probably we see the most growth at the moment, is out in Asia. Not sure if any people on here have got sites out in Asia. So when you actually proportion that for the non-conformances, you'll see that 56% of the non-conformances are in America, 40% are in Europe, and only 4% in Asia. So there's quite a difference there when you compare it back to their certificates. So Europe's got 35% of the certificates and 40% of the non-conformances. So it's about 5% more, okay, against certificates. And then America's got 36% of them versus 46% of their certificates. So you'll see quite a difference there between the findings that are being raised in Asia per certificate compared to those comparing it to America and Europe. So if I present it slightly differently, on the next slide, it just shows you the ratio of NCRs to certificate. So globally, approximately 3.5 non-conformances per certificate. America's 4.5, Europe 4.4, and then Asia's down there at 0.76. So we kind of look at this data and think, well, either America and Europe are really bad, and the performance of the organisations isn't there, or Asia's really good, or it's difference in the auditors. So that's something the IAQG are working on at the moment, and there's something coming in which I'll come to at the moment, which is trying to look at this, looking at the reasons why and try and stop it, because something's not right, and they're just trying to figure out what's wrong and what they can do to change it, because at the end of the day, people's lives are at risk with aircraft. They need to ensure that it's a global level, everyone's performing as they should be, because everyone buys everything from everywhere around the world nowadays. And when you break it down to the majors and minors, you'll actually see even more of a difference between Europe, Americas, and Asia, especially against the majors there. So this is per certificate. So if you just think every certificate, once a year they'll get an assessment. Obviously some people get more, but every client organisation. So you can almost say that every client in Europe, as you get an assessment, you'll get one major non-conformance and three minor non-conformances, 3.5, something like that, per assessment. So this information helps you to understand where you are in comparison to the industry norms. Now, every company is different, and everyone's got different client bases, and some people got a small percent of aerospace, some have got a larger. So don't take this as read that, oh no, this is what we should be doing, or we're worse than this, or we're better than this. It's just an industry average. It's not sort of criticize anyone in particular. It's just to present the data and show what the norm is. So you can look at the data and take it how you want, but it's kind of a good gauge for you as an organisation to pitch yourself. I've done an 11-day assessment that I finished this week. We raised one minor non-conformance, and they were a bit taken aback. They thought, oh, that's bad, but actually it's very, very good if you think the length of the audit. Every client's different, but we get quite a lot of people asking how do they perform against the industry. So we can present this data now and just show you roughly where you are compared to the norm. So we can break down the data into each of the categories, as I've shown, look at the non-conformances. So what we've done is we actually looked at the new requirements that came into revision D. So every few years they revise standards, and what they do when they come to revise the standards, they look at what problems they've got in industry. So the people Boeing, MOD, Airbus, Rolls-Royce, they kind of get together because they're the ones that are stakeholders in this. And they say, right, we're having problems with counterfeit, for example. That was one of the big ones that got introduced. So, okay, what do we need to do? And then they will put that into the standard, put it out onto certification bodies to then go and help resolve the issues in counterfeit parts. So as these new requirements come in, we expect a spike, and then they kind of taper off a little bit as people sort of get used to it. But what will also happen is they put it out as a tester, and then the next revision of the standard, they'll make it even more challenging. So they kind of introduce counterfeit and obsolescence and things like that into the latest revision. We expect that to be in the newer revision when it does come out, but we expect some sort of tightening up of it, some certain expectations. The interesting part is actually when you look at some of these points, if we just pick obsolescence, for example, there in the middle. So they introduced that requirement because they had a problem in the industry. When we've gone out and assessed as auditors, we're not finding the problems. So that they start to ask questions. Well, are auditors not picking it up, or are clients got really good at obsolescence management all of a sudden? So those are the types of things we use this data for, and we look at ourselves as a certification body. We look at our auditors, and just to fine tune and just see, are we doing the best we can as a certification body to make sure our auditors are fully aware of these requirements? Are they capturing things? Are they looking at it? Are they interrogating organisation systems for these specific parts? These are the types of bits we take at the front end of the year. We have a conference every January. We'll look at the data, and then we will implement sort of training around these subjects that look a little bit weak in terms of number of findings, and we'll give additional training to the auditors just to make sure we're performing as we should be. That's what industry expects. So it's quite interesting when you actually start to look at the data. Well, it is for me anyway. You might think I'm quite sad, but interesting one in there actually is escape prevention. It's something I wrote about the other day actually. We're probably not looking at escape prevention too much, but if you think about it, anything that goes off to the customer that was non-conforming that they've returned shows you haven't got proper escape prevention process in place. It's kind of a clause that's hidden away. It's 811, I believe F, if I remember rightly. So it's something we're starting to look at, and just to challenge people's management systems a little bit better, just to see, are organisations truly trying to prevent products escaping that are non-conforming? Were there any points within the process they could have made more robust to ensure those things don't escape? Okay. So how does this impact you as an organisation? So you probably want to look at the last part of this stand here, the third bullet point a little bit here. So what's coming is auditors are going to have KPI targets as an area of focus. Personally, I don't agree with it. I just think it could possibly drive the wrong behaviours. Could make auditors think, oh, I've got to hit this target every audit, and they'll go hunting for things. And vice versa, they could sort of say, right, I've hit my target and I'll sit back and relax. That's not what they're trying to do, obviously. That's not what industry is trying to do. What they're trying to do is make sure that any of the sort of people that are really outside of the range, and I don't know what the range is going to be yet. If I just look at the data, they'll expect 1 major and 3 minors every audit. I don't think that will be the target, but just using that as an example. And it's not going to be someone that doesn't raise a major but does 4 minors and things like that. It's not going to be that. It's going to be the organisations where there are no findings, or there are going to be loads of findings. You know, you get 2 extremes. It's not necessarily. It's a point for us as a certification body to look at the auditors. Is there anything going wrong there, or is it just a specific pool of clients they've worked with? It does happen where auditors go into the same ones every few years. They find out all the kinks, and actually every audit goes quite smoothly. So it happens. So it's not, no one needs to panic. It's more just to give the certification bodies the opportunity to look and see if there's anything that's alarming that we need to look at, really. So I think it depends how the rules are applied, in honesty, for this new requirement that's coming in. We're already kind of looking at it, in honesty. We've known this has been coming for probably about 18 months. So we're already looking at our auditors' performance. We've pulled the data from OASIS. We've looked at some of those ones that are probably a bit extreme on both ends of the spectrum. We've sort of weeded those ones out, and so we're comfortable where we are and where auditors are at the moment. But, so it's something we're already looking at. You probably won't notice any difference. Hopefully you don't anyway. But it's to be aware that's coming in. Now the other part are the non-conformances, where you can picture yourself against industry norms. You can sort of look at yourself. You can pull your own data from OASIS if you're a certified organisation. You can look at that and actually say, well, what is our average? Some of you may already know, but there's quite a lot of you that probably don't actually average that out over the cycle. We do. We look at each client, but do you as an organisation look at it? It's quite a good measure for yourselves. Where are you against these industry norms? Okay, and the information is also going to be used for future assessment day calculations, which I'll come to in a minute. You'll see that and how that's going to apply. So all this data they've built up in OASIS over the years, they're now starting to pull out and use and carve in the future of the certification scheme. So, right, sorry, excuse me, it's getting a bit dry. So what we'll do now is we'll look at the AS 9104-1 standard. So there's actually 3 standards in total. AS 9104-1 is the standard for the accreditation. So that's what we have to build our rules around. -2 and -3. So -2 is the oversight. So that's where some of you may have had witnessed assessments where UCAS come along, but then you get someone from industry come along. So it's very industry heavy, this standard. There's lots of oversight. I have to go to meetings every quarter, and then I get a lot of the stakeholders there. Boeing are there, Rolls-Royce, lots of people, lots of different organisations. So they're heavily watching the standard, and that's really what the -2 is about. So it doesn't really impact us too much as a certification body. It kind of sets out the rules on how they're going to conduct themselves, how often they're going to come and visit, things like that. So they also come to visit us at our head office during the UCAS assessments. They're always sitting there as well. They're kind of watching UCAS, who's watching us, and everyone's watching each other. And -3 is the standard for auditor approval. So I'm approved to -3, Archer's approved. So any auditor that wishes to get approved to do aerospace auditing has to follow this approval for the -3. So -1 and -3 are the ones that are being updated. They're all being updated, but -1 and -3 are the ones that are being updated that impact us the most. -3 has actually been trying to be updated for about 10 years now. Problem is when you get too many stakeholders around the world, everyone wants certain bits in it, and then they end up just sort of talking about it a lot. But we think we're there with it now. So this standard they're hoping will be out early next year. Things happen, so I'm guessing as of the COVID impact, it will probably be delayed slightly as well, I imagine. So this is going to focus mostly on the -1, which impacts you directly. So so just audit durations. So the audit durations that you currently experience are going to be changing. So they're bringing in this new tool called the OCAP. I'll go into a little bit of detail on that in a moment, but basically it's a risk assess process. So some organisation could see an increase in their audit time, some could see less, and some will just stay the same. So they haven't necessarily added time to the norm, but there's opportunities there for increasing and decreasing. I'll go into a bit of detail on that in a moment. Single site and multi-site structures only. So depends on who's online here, but in the aerospace scheme, there's currently campus, several site. There's actually another one called complex, but there's only 2 organisations in the world on that. That's also going. But if you're a campus organisation or a several site organisation, those structures are going. Several site will probably move over to multi-site. Campus is a little bit different. You could probably go one way or the other. It sounds strange, but it all depends what you want on your certificate. Some of our client organisations have like a warehouse over the road just for storing finished goods or something like that. It's not really integral, but we have to go and audit it because that's where product is. What they're sort of saying with the campus is, well, if you don't want that on the certificate because it's just a storage unit, we'll still go and see it. You don't need that on the certificate, and then you can move over to single site. If it is something that's integral and you're doing a bit more than just storing something, for example, then you're likely to go over to multi-site. At the moment, campus gives you a little bit less time than what a multi-site would. So they're also building in certain things to allow you to adjust the time, which we haven't been able to do in the past. Basically, they gave you the time, that's your time you've got to do out the standard. You can't deviate from that. What they're now allowing you to do is do certain deviations within the OCAP tool. So if you are a campus going to a multi-site, doesn't mean you're going to suddenly get lots more time, because if the campus isn't doing contract review or certain things like that, we can actually start reducing your time again. So in theory, you can possibly come out exactly the same as what you're experiencing currently. Purchasing no longer mandatory for every single audit. Bit surprising on that one, but at the same time I can understand, because some organisations purchasing just is not really that key, but as auditors we're forced to go and actually audit it. which takes away time from certain things that we possibly should be looking at. So they're giving us that flexibility that we don't have to look at purchasing each time. We are going to be allowed to do 30% remote assessments at the, I know currently COVID times, everything's being performed remotely at the moment. What they're doing is going forward, when the standard does kick in, because currently we can't do any remote, they're going to allow us to do up to 30% remotely, which would be good in a way, because auditors can spend time looking at certain documents. You're not under pressure on site, people watching over you. So we can do some remote, same as what we're doing currently, look at audits, look at management review, certain things like that we can do for preparation before we come on site to see you. There's also something that's going to allow the possible time to be reduced by 50%. I'll go into detail on that. People shouldn't get too excited because they're putting in quite tight controls on it. But as your performance improves, and if you drive performance, then you can get the benefit of reduced time by up to 50%. They're trying to drive improvement, drive performance, and increases. That's the idea behind it, really. So you get, for being good, you get reduced time. For not being so good, you get increased time. Doesn't mean auditors are going to go out and just make sure everyone's being naughty. That's not, I know that's at least not what we do here at NQA. Try and give a valid assessment.
Can I add there, Mike? I think with the remote audit activity, the 30%, it's a little bit more productive use of the time when you're looking at the top and tail of the standard in some respects. That we probably found slightly different kind of non-conformance based on that, because we have a little bit more time then to look into more of the detail when we're looking into kind of more of the specification type stuff. So you get the time to kind of get remotely into the detail of it, rather than sat on site focusing purely on the kind of production processes. So you get a sort of different aspect to the audit, which is quite positive also. Yeah,
it's quite interesting how COVID it's forcing us all to sort of do remote. We're kind of questioning whether it'll be interesting once it's all finished to see the difference in the findings, if we're finding less now. Our assumption was that we would never find anything doing it remote, but actually we are still finding things. But I do think it's switched slightly because it's forcing us to look at more of the paperwork. So it's quite interesting, actually. Archie says it allows us to focus on certain things, and then when we're on site, we can then focus on the production elements. So yes, I'm glad they're putting 30%, to be honest. I think it's quite a good idea. I've got a question here about the NCRs. Do you see similar results when analysing NCRs for 9001? Are there less NCRs in general? That OASIS only does aerospace non-conformances, so we don't have that data. There's no industry data out there for it, and every CB is going to protect their own data. I do 9001 audits, and I would probably say that there are less findings in 9001, just purely because of the requirements of aerospace are so much tighter. There's a lot more emphasis, for obvious reasons, to sort of, there's more areas you can go wrong, there's more things to catch you out. Not trying to catch you out, but you know what I mean. It's just a very difficult standard to manage. It's quite intense. So I just think generally, I haven't got any data, but from my own personal experience, I'd say, I raise a lot more in aerospace than I do in 9001. Go on.
That's also on customer expectation as well, in the sense of how you manage your system in terms of majors and minors also.
Yeah. Okay, just trying to think, I may have covered this as I was talking. So the OCAP tool going to be calculated at each site. It actually takes quite a lot of work to use the OCAP tool. I'll show you in a minute. It'll look fairly simplistic, but it actually takes a lot more time. So what they're getting us to do is to put certain percent of our audit time for the overall audit time will be planning time. It says there they've allowed 10% for that and 10% for report writing. 10% of report writing sometimes okay, but quite often it can get up to 20% as well. It just depends on the organisation, things like that, the size, complexity, number of auditors, things like that. So they're basically saying 10% minimum for that, 10% for audit planning, which is something they've never done before. So they've introduced that. So the audit planning bit will be used for generating the audit calculations, and we've been tasked with doing a lot more things behind the scenes. So we're going to need a lot more input from clients beforehand, before the assessment, to gather that data. So we already send out a data gathering form to everyone for their assessment, which is about 3 months before. It's important that we get those back, but we'll be changing those to get the extra information we need. We're not going to be changing it anytime soon because the requirement's not there, but will come in probably next year. I'm guessing we'll start to roll it out. So that people see that form as not needed, but actually it's quite integral to us as auditors to allow us to plan the audit effectively. Something we work quite hard on, and we have been working quite hard on quite recently, because sometimes turn up on site and it's totally different to what we expected. So we weren't really given that information before. So they're actually going to force this requirement onto organisations, and if you don't comply with it, we're to raise non-conformances on it. I think generally most of the clients we have, I know my clients, I generally get the forms back. Some take a little bit of chasing, but basically if those aren't filled in, we can't do our audit calculations. You'll probably go to high risk because we haven't got the data. We'll assume it's high risk. You'll get more time. So it's in your own interest to actually fill those forms in and send them back to us. The auditors are going to have to change over as well. So currently there's a rule for you can do 2 cycles as a lead auditor, and then you have to come out for a whole cycle. So when I say a cycle, I'm talking 3 years. So auditors will, the lead auditor, sometimes when we're teaming up, will switch. So the other auditor will then go lead and the other one goes supporting. What they're doing is actually saying the whole team has to come out now. So you can't then do that rotation, which is okay for most organisations, but if you've got something quite complex, it can be quite challenging. So we team up for a reason, that we can do a smooth transition of the data. It could take an auditor 2 years to get their head around the specific organisation and understanding it. So by having 2 auditors there, it helps that transition. So we're going to have to manage that slightly differently going forward. But they're not saying you need to come out for a whole cycle. They're only saying you need to come out for 1 assessment. So the whole team can basically go away for a year and then come back. Doing that literally, probably not the best method, but that's something you could do. Because you want to keep that continuity and you build up relationships with consultants and clients. Right, so kind of covered this. So CV shall require client participation in the audit planning process. So this is really filling in those forms, sending it back to us, and the auditor is going to have to start doing some quite detailed analysis of that to establish your audit time. I had the conversation with one auditor the other day that knows this coming in, because often auditors will plan their next assessment when they're on site. So what we're going to kind of do, we'll train all our auditors up to be able to do them, and then they can take a best guess at that point, just to allow for planning, and then it may adjust further down the line. It's kind of err on the side of caution, and then when we get to formally scheduling it and updates and things like that the year after, we can tweak it. So that's probably what we'll do. So there's a question about the PBS. I'll come to that. That's okay. I've got a slide on that. Right, so before each assessment, part of the planning, these are the items that we're going to have to cover. So this is the data we're going to have to get beforehand. Your on-time delivery performance, it's a little bit complicated. That it's not just we're hitting 90%. What they're doing is they're saying, is it 90% of your clients or your customers are on time, then you go low risk. and if it's 50%. So there's probably some bits in your systems that you're going to have to do, pull the data and just adjust it slightly in how you present it, because they're asking it to be displayed slightly different for this purpose. We'll obviously give you more guidance on this nearer the time. Customer complaints and returns. Just need that data, really, the volume of them. And again, it's not, oh, we've had 10, that means you're high risk. That's not what the data's looking at. So it's not, you can't have no complaints or returns, because most people do. It's just natural. It's more kind of the types, the volumes and things like that. So again, all data will come out to you on how to deal with this. KPI results. So your KPI results against the pairs. We need that data off you. I know we get that currently on the form. That's something we do already collect. Pair scores, so the scores from previous assessments. Obviously, if you haven't had an assessment, that bit will just go as medium risk. So any of these things that we don't get will just go medium risk when you're a brand new organisation going for certification. Internal auditor competence. This is an interesting one. So at the moment, anyone can technically do your internal audits. We're fully approved AEA auditors, so we're on OASIS. We're registered AEA auditors. We go through all the training and the weeks of it and things like that, and under constant monitoring. So they're saying that we're kind of different level of competence to just someone who's done a 9001, for example. So what they're doing is they're putting different categories. So it depends who does your internal audits, and their competence themselves is whether you go high, medium or low risk. So it's something that you need to look at, who are doing your internal audits. If you're doing internal audits, you might want to start looking at what training do you need to do to really improve your competence levels. Some of you have taken the official courses, some haven't. Some have just done 9,000, some done 9,000 in 1998 or something. So something to look at. Again, you've got a couple of years on this, so you don't need to rush out now and look for training courses, but it's something you should consider in a year or two. And the size and complexity of the site. So if you're single site, you're small, you've got 15 multi-sites, things like that. So that's something that will come into it as well, into the audit time. So results can be a 10% reduction in time, no change, or 10% addition. And that's basically going to go on a high, medium or low risk, depending on all those inputs we get up there. The 50% reduction on the PSB bit, PBS, that's different, which I'll come to. There's a question here about pair. So I'm guessing someone on here not fully aware of the aerospace scheme. Okay, pair is the process assessment effectiveness. It's each of your processes get scored. Anything in section 8, that is. It's a little bit complex to probably explain on here, but basically it looks at your KPI results, how are you performing against your KPIs, and then whether the assessor has any findings against that process. And you get a score of 1 to 5, 5 being good, 1 being bad. So we'll use those previous results from last year's assessment, and that will change, will impact the audit calculations. I think we might not have anything specific on a website on pairs, but I can email you something afterwards to explain it in a little bit more detail if you wish. We should have your email here. Yeah. Okay. Right. So here is a cutout of the OCAP tool. So I was actually on the testing for this. So it's gone through quite a few iterations. First time we ran it, the numbers were coming out quite spurious. Then they adjusted it, the calculations, things like that. And this is kind of, you don't really need to worry too much about this, but you can see down the left is the on-time delivery, the product service rating, complaints. Those are the kind of inputs that we use. And then you can see the categories on the columns for low, medium and high. And then we'll basically pin you in there and out spits a result whether you're high, medium or low, which you'll see down the bottom. Okay, so this is, I just ran it, just a standard organization, 40 people, just a surveillance visit, and it spits out total time is 2.4. That 2.4 is planning and report writing. Yeah. So it seems more, but it's not. So if you look at a current model that we would run for this size organization, it would come out at 2 days plus half a day for the assessment report. So it actually comes out exactly the same number, because obviously we can't do 2.4, we round out to 2.5. So there's no real impact there. If we then look at low and medium risk, same scenario, 40 employees, you'll see in there that we can take away if there's no design, no purchasing, things like that. So that's where the campus and things like that, where you take things away. Okay, so if it's low risk, it comes down to 1.8, and then high risk, again, it hasn't really changed, it's still 2.4. So using this scenario, a low, if you're getting good points, you could actually reduce your time by half a day, because we'll always round up. We can't do 1.8 of a day, we'll round it up to 2. But in essence, low risk, you're going to save yourself half a day. Obviously every CB is different, they charge differently, but you know, could be saving yourself quite a few hundred pounds really. So that's with 40 employees. It doesn't impact as much in the lower numbers, but if you're talking 100 employees, 200, you know, upwards, it can have a great impact on what the results are, because it can swing either way, 10%. So you could, you know, could be costing you a lot of money, and it could be saving you some money as well. So the idea is to focus on improving your systems, making sure your KPIs are on target, make sure you're focusing on your customers, getting the products out on time, good quality, things like that. So as I say, it's trying to drive performance improvements. Okay, so the PBS RP qualification requirements. So currently no one ever uses it, in all honesty. There's an IAF document called ASRP, some of you may have heard of it, and it's Advanced Surveillance Production Plan. It's kind of it's really complex, which is why no one uses it. But if you've had really good performance over a cycle, you can then use that to reduce the overall time needed on assessments. No one really used it, which is why it's been removed, because it was just so complex. That's actually an ISO standard requirement. It's not an aerospace specific, but as the ISO industry got rid of it, Aerospace have introduced this new thing here. So it will take an initial qualification. This is how you can get up to 50% reduction in your audit time. It's not on top of the 10% reduction, it's 50% maximum overall. So you'll see these things down here. I won't go into huge detail, just as time's getting on. Of the things that you need to do to qualify. So there's a checklist that we have to fill in, which is part of the OCAP tool, which we can go in and you can present us with, for argument's sake, your ethics policy. We'll know about your competent auditors. We'll know about your on-time delivery. You have to go one whole cycle first. You can't do this if you're a brand new organisation. You have to do at least 3 years. So when we come around to your reassessment, we can then evaluate where you are the last 3 years, and then we can look at doing a reduction going forward if you meet all these requirements. So these are some things that you can really focus on as an organisation to make sure you're improving and, you know, trying to hit these things. Ethics policy is interesting because it's not even in the standard. I did question it, but no one really answered me, in all honesty. It says about ethics in there, but it's not a specific policy. So you'll have to start looking at things like that. So those are requirements. And then what will happen every year, we have to do a re-qualification to make sure we can continue to do the 50%. So it's, you know, get it in the first place, and then we review it annually just to make sure you continue to perform as required. Okay, you'll see in there it says no major NCRs, not NCRs in general, because obviously there's a difference between major and minor. So it's the major NCRs. I can see that getting a little bit heated at times. where auditors want to do a major and a client's trying to argue down to a minor. We get in a lot of trouble if we do that. Auditors won't raise majors if they don't have to, but our hands are tied in certain areas because of the requirements. They're quite explicit on what's deemed as a major. So just be wary of that. Okay. So transition timeline, they're expecting 12 months for the certification bodies as a publication, sorry, the accreditation bodies. So that's the UCASs and things like that. And then the certification bodies are going to be 18 months after publication. And then all clients will then go through a cycle, transitioning over and things like that. So we don't know when the standard's coming out fully. We were told it will be sort of early next year, sort of the first quarter, but we don't know at the moment. Haven't heard an update. So you've got some time yet to start thinking about some of these improvements that you could do. Start focusing on your KPIs, your pair scores, really trying to drive improvements, complaints, on-time delivery. You can start doing that work now, because in theory you could go straight into the reduced 50% time if we've got all that data. So, you know, it's a good time to actually start looking at some of those things before we sort of come down hard on it as well. So it'll be good for you. Okay, we're almost there. I'm getting chased here. Auditor time, already mentioned that about cycling through. Transfer rule for additional time if less than 12 months. There's a crazy rule at the moment. No one's ever given me an answer why. If you want to transfer to another certification and you've got less than 12 months on your current certificate, we have to do extra time, extra visits to do that transfer process. It seems crazy. So they've actually removed that because it penalizes people, because a lot of people will do a 3-year contract and then recert. They might go out to look for other prices. Problem is, when they look for other prices, the competitors who they're not already with will be priced out of it because they're having to do this extra time. So that's a good thing they're removing. Other potential standards being brought into assessments. This is something they're looking at doing. So things like 6081, there's other standards, AS, like the APQP, which we're about to cover. So they're looking at expanding the auditor's skill set, and we can give you certificates. So not just AS 9100, it could be others. This is probably not going to come into the next revision, but they're kind of prepping it. There's certain bits at the end of the standard that's getting us to look at those types of things that organisations are doing. So if there are other standards that you're interested in, that kind of takes you from this level up a notch. There's all kinds of other standards. There's a good one about corrective actions called 9S. You know, we can actually assess you to those as well. So that they're looking at bringing that in. Little bit transferring to other CBs. They're not allowing you to keep the same auditor if they perform the audits within 24 months. What the industry was getting was not so much in this country. People were changing certification bodies all the time and following the auditor around. And it's not really good consistency. Your customers don't like it, and plus it's a way the auditor can try and hide this six-year rule. So they're basically getting rid of that, which is fine. It shouldn't really cause too many problems. Very strict on major and minor grading. They're actually getting stricter than what they already are. So as I say, auditors, if they say it's a major, it's probably definitely a major, because we can get in a lot of trouble if we downgrade it to a minor when it should in fact be a major. And clients, as I said earlier, will receive non-conformances if the pre-data is not given to allow us to do the OCAP tool. So just some things to think about. You as a client, more attention being placed on your KPIs, possible changes to your auditors, but probably not. Site structures, definitely if you're a campus or a several site, I don't think there's anyone on here as a complex, you will be impacted with the time. So it's not a bad idea to start asking the questions. If you're doing budget calculations, things like that, what's the chances, what's the likelihood? And think about your management system as well. If you've called yourself a campus, you've got to start thinking Do you need to structure things differently? And there's certain requirements if you are a multi-site as well. There's a separate document, IEF MD1, I think it's one, that require certain requirements for multi-site. So you might have to start thinking about those as well. Keep an eye on your on-time delivery. Keep working hard at it. Auditor training, as I said, just things to start working on. Okay, so any questions? Don't know if you've got any, Archie, you've seen. Someone's asked if they can get a copy of the slides. Yeah, all the slides will come out at the end, so whoever's registered will get a copy of the slides. So we'll send those out. Marketing sends those out. But if you've got any specific questions on any of them, just give me a shout. You can drop me an email, or you can contact the Aerospace team on aerospace@nqa.com. It won't come direct to me, but they'll forward it on to me anyway. Or you can ask me on LinkedIn as well. Is there anything?
There's one there about risk calculation. So for audit duration, whether it's the same tool used for 9001.
Do you use the same risk calculation audit? No, this is purely just aerospace. This aerospace scheme specific. This totally separate from ISO. Yeah, so no different at all for ISO. It's not going to be impacted at all from this. This is purely anyone who's AS 9100, 9110, 9120. Okay, is there anything else there?
No, I think that's the other one's answer.
Okay, so what we'll do, if there are any questions anytime, you can drop them in there. We'll catch them at the end anyway. So we'll take a little break, 15 minutes. People need to go bathroom, get a drink, anything like that. Stretch your legs. Probably bored of me talking already. So we'll take a little break,